Welcome to the State House News Service interview series. I'm Mike Dean, coming to you from Suffolk University's Tremont Street studio in downtown Boston. Joining me today is Higher Education Commissioner Dr. Richard Freeland, who is tasked with helming the state's public colleges and universities. It's like in this climate of an election year and everything, higher education sometimes gets pushed to the background a little bit, especially with the emphasis being put on K through 12 education. But maybe you could just talk a little bit about how that education reform initiative that the governor has put forward and the legislature has passed earlier this year will affect higher education either soon or down the line.
I think that the effort that Massachusetts has made going back to 1993 to invest in the K through 12 system and make sure that young people coming out of our high schools are college ready has been one of the great successes of public policy in my 40 years working in the state. And the new education reform bill passed this last January will enhance that, no question. The challenge is that as we have been investing in the K through 12 system, we have been disinvesting in the higher ed system going back over the last 2 decades. So the paradox that I keep wanting to point out to people is we are leading the nation in investing in K through 12 to get young people ready for college, and then we're disinvesting in the institutions they're going to go to.
You have been vocal and outspoken recently, especially about cuts to higher education. What kind of feedback have you been receiving either from the legislature or from the Patrick administration?
I find general agreement with the problem. I think people understand that these reductions in support are problematic. The governor has been terrific in the past year. He proposed an actual increase. He tried to reverse the pattern that I've been concerned about. It didn't survive in the ultimate budget, but he made an attempt at it. When I talk with members of the legislature, they typically say, "You're absolutely right. This is something we need to address." The reality is that the structure of the state budget is very well carved up through a lot of constituencies and a lot of interests and a lot of very important programs, and it's just very hard to move money around. But I don't think people fail to see the importance of the issue. Mm-hmm. I have not found that problem.
So as far as solutions, though, are there on different sides as far as the policy to fix it?
The solution in terms of funding is elusive because of the structure of the state budget, and there are so many commitments in that budget that are hardwired in. The cost of health care, for example, just keeps going up and consuming a larger and larger percentage of the budget, and there are mandates that drive that. The cost of public employee benefits, which is also hardwired, goes up and up and up, so it's very hard to find incremental money.
Last month, the Boston Globe published a story about UMass Amherst and how it can't quite break into the top tier of public universities in the country. And I was wondering, what was your reaction to that story, and do you dispute any of the facts put forward?
I have 2 reactions to that story. The first is the story was very unfair to UMass Amherst because that is a fine university. Young people who go there get a first-rate education. There are distinguished graduate programs. There are world-class research institutes. There's a lot of good news coming out of UMass and UMass Amherst. And the subsequent ranking by the Times of London of UMass as one of the top 200 universities in the world, I think, confirmed the fact that the story was one-sided in that respect. That said, there was a kernel of truth in that story about public attitudes toward public higher education in this state. The story quoted a former governor. The story raised the question, do we in Massachusetts really need a first-class system of public higher education? And I think that is a real challenge. We have these great private universities. We have Harvard, we have MIT, we have my institution, Northeastern, when I was president there. We have other great private institutions. And so there's always been this question in Massachusetts, do we need a first-class system of public higher education? And I think in drawing attention to that issue, the story touched on an important point.
One of the major initiatives of public higher education in the state is the Vision Project. I don't know if you could explain that a little for us.
The Vision Project is a major initiative of the Board of Higher Education that Chairman Desmond of the Board of Higher Education and I have been developing over the last year, working closely with our colleagues on the campuses and our colleagues in each of the segments, UMass, the state universities, and the community colleges. And it is really, the Vision Project is really addressed to that issue we just talked about in the context of the UMass Amherst article. I believe we need to change underlying public attitudes towards public higher education. When you asked me the question about the budget and how can we find some incremental support and how can we reverse that pattern, I said it's hard to change. The reason that it's hard to change is that the public isn't yet strongly enough demanding a first-class public system. I believe we will have the system of public higher education that the people of the Commonwealth demand. And when they say to the legislature, you can't cut higher education because our kids are going to go to those institutions, that's when we're going to see some change. So the Vision Project is about changing underlying public attitudes by bringing all of higher education together in a unified way to draw attention to the excellence of the system. So the Vision Project includes a set of highly aspirational goals. We say we want to be national leaders in the percentage of our young people that we educate. We want to be national leaders in the percentage of our students in public higher education that graduate from our colleges. We want to be national leaders in eliminating disparities among subpopulations, ethnic groups, racial groups, income groups, in terms of success in college. And we're going to drive to be first in the country in all of those things because we believe that Massachusetts needs the best educated citizenry and workforce in the country. That's the premise of the Vision Project. I think people understand that. Given the nature of this economy, given the nature of this state, Massachusetts needs the best educated citizenry and workforce in the country. Where's that best educated citizenry and workforce going to come from? It's going to come from our public institutions. We are doing our job of aspiring to national leadership. We need public support to get there.
So in your opinion, does everything hinge on that public support in order to get the funding to implement some of the changes?
I believe that is fundamentally right. I believe that is fundamentally right. It's a political process. Legislatures operate in a political environment. You talk to any legislator about the cause you're promoting and what they will tell you some version of the following. We need ultimately to respond to what the public is demanding. We can't go too far apart from what our constituents are telling us. So if our constituents aren't complaining when we cut the budgets of higher education, maybe we'll go on cutting. Because when we cut other parts of the budget, we hear about it. So I believe we need to get to the broader public and address some of these underlying attitudes.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that 2/3 of the students from Massachusetts who go to college go to these public institutions.
2/3 who go in-state.
Right, okay, go in-state. If we were to change from the MCAS standards to federal education standards,
the Common Core standards?
Common Core standards, could that affect the way our public universities take in freshmen? Is that going to cause headaches for people on the college level?
No, I believe this will be a positive thing in terms of the relationship between the K-12 system and the higher ed system for the following reason. One of our challenges in Massachusetts, and it's a challenge all over the country, is that the standards for graduation from high school and for high school completion are not well aligned with the standards for college admission. For example, we have these MCAS tests, and I'm a very strong supporter of MCAS. But the MCAS tests don't tell you whether or not a student is ready for college. They tell you whether they've met a certain 10th grade level standard for high school graduation. When we assess students' college readiness, we use a different instrument altogether throughout public higher education called the AccuPlacer. But when you administer the AccuPlacer to students coming out of Massachusetts high schools to go into our public system, you find very large numbers placed into remediation. So even though students in their own mind have met our high school standards, they've completed MCAS, one of the toughest tests in the country, they come into public higher education and they're in remedial courses. That disconnect is problematic. The Common Core standards will give us a basis for aligning our expectations at the admissions end with high school's expectations for completion, and that will be a positive step forward.
Okay, well, I'd like to thank my guest, Higher Education Commissioner Richard Freeland, for joining me today at Suffolk University's downtown Boston studio. Remember to visit statehousenews.com for exclusive coverage of Massachusetts state government. For the State House News Service, I'm Mike Dean. Thank you for watching.